London, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and you are listening to Wrestling Republic's daily broadcast, your one-stop shop for pro wrestling insight, news, and reviews on a daily basis. Today is Sunday Funday, and today we're going to be doing a brand new game show on this show we are calling Wrestling's Heaven and Hell, where our contestants arguing why their wrestling loves and hates should be sent to either wrestling heaven or hell. The rules are very, very simple. Each round, the contestants will argue why they believe their love or hate should go to either wrestling heaven or hell, with me then choosing which one of the two will get that honor. Joining me as the first contestant today, we have Clark Taylor. How are you, Clark?
I'm doing well. I went to a wedding last night. It was a heck of a time. Tank Davis got the win against Ryan Garcia. Shout out Tank Davis. I was excited about that. I mean, just stoked to be here on a Sunday Funday. It's perfect. Easy afternoon.
Absolutely. It's undoubtedly one of the most fun shows of the week, as the name suggests. But also joining us today, we have Coby Galenzoski. How are you, Coby?
See, the fact of the matter is you haven't hyped me up enough. I was the creator of Sunday Funday saying, we should be doing game shows. We should be doing trivia nights. And then all of a sudden, my debut for this show, you posed me on the thumbnail as the damn devil.
Yep.
Talk about conspiracies.
That is classic.
That is the true conspiracy of Sunday Funday, Clark, not the quiz being rigged against you.
Oh no, but, we eventually overcame that challenge.
Wait, have you won one? Yeah, I don't think you have you?
I won the put it in the room against Ignacio. I count that.
That doesn't count. That's not a quiz. But yes, absolutely. Last week we did Room 101, and if you haven't checked that show out yet, it is excellent. So make sure you go and watch it. But
wait a minute, Ben. If it's a separate category, that makes me undefeated.
Well, that's true.
Let's be clear. I'm just saying. I'm kidding.
Sorry,
I didn't mean to cut you off like that.
It's a new show today. It's a new era. And we are getting right into things with our first topic, which is wrestling hell. So, our contestants are now going to choose something, a general topic that they want to put into wrestling hell. Each of them are going to have a go and try and convince me of it. Firstly, Coby, let's go to you.
Of course, the originator of Sunday Funday deserves to start this. So anyway, what I want to put into wrestling hell is something that very much became apparent being in attendance for WrestleMania weekend, and we saw this on multiple occasions, and this was entrances being cut short. And I mean, one of the first shows of the weekend, of course, what for us and for the Wrestling Republic crew was Supercard of Honor, and this was evident in like the Reach for the Sky ladder match, where you'd have the tag team enter almost as soon as they were walking down to get to the ringside area off of the stage, a new team would be entering. And at the end of the day, like, I think part of what wrestling is seeing those entrances, and entrances are supposed to get you and are supposed to entertain you at the end of the day. There's a reason why everyone in attendance loves to sing Cody Rhodes' Woe or Seth Rollins' song or Chris Jericho's Judas. There's a lot of that in wrestling. And when you're cutting them short, I don't want to say you're necessarily depriving the fans of that, but as a matter of just cutting short like the tag entrances, and we saw that at WrestleMania as well for both showcases, is they almost walked down half of the ramp. Yes, it's a long ramp, but then they would move on to another team, and it was like, well, you're not giving each team except for the final team an equal amount of time. And we saw that like Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler getting the last entrance. Well, yeah, of course you're going to get to see them walk down the whole way, but we didn't get to see that for like Liv and Raquel and Chelsea and Sonya Deville and stuff like that. I just feel like this is either a production error or just some form of like, I don't like it as a wrestling. It's like
I've always thought as well when I've been, watching it, like when wrestlers are coming down the ramp and then another wrestler comes straight out while they're still walking down the ramp, it almost makes sense to fight right away or something. Why are they happy about it? They've been overshadowed. But Clark, what are your thoughts? on wrestling entrances being cut short?
I think it's a great point that actually Coby made, but at the same time, because I love entrances. That's one of my favorite parts of the shows, right? Is seeing the entrances and seeing everybody's hearing the theme music and all of that. For me, I think at the end of the day, where else could you shave the time? Because you'd be taken away from matches, you'd be taken away from backstage segments, you'd be taken away from promos. And I think as a part of production, you have to save it somewhere. And the televised audience is as important as the live audience. And it affects the live audience much deeper than it does the televised audience, which is actually the larger audience. Unfortunately, as much as I love the in-house audience, television is king in this scenario. And I don't know where else they could shave minutes in order to fit within a time window, if not with that type of entrance stuff.
Any response to that, Coby?
I almost feel like you should be thinking about the match as a whole. Because when I think of a match, I think of the entrances, the ring announcing. I think of the match itself, the celebration. I don't think of only the in-ring wrestling component. If it's a 20-minute and 50-second match, the match is extended past that, not just the time from bell to bell. So I think you should be accounting for those entrances, at least to a degree where it doesn't show like you're rushing. Because I do almost feel like that comes often enough in AEW, where you can kind of see that where, oh, another wrestler's coming down, and it's like, well, what is this? Are they cutting the entrance short because they need more time, or are like did something go wrong? And it overall contributes to like a very much and not an amateurish production standpoint. And
I get.
But this happens in WWE.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying WWE is null and able to avoid this.
Yeah, it's one of those things too for me though, where I just, and that's the hardest part, Coby, right? It doesn't look great when it does happen, but just where else do you shave the time? Because you have to, right? And it's the other one that makes it difficult is when you have entrances heading into a commercial break and the guy has to stand in the ring. That's awkward, but it's the nature of the beast on television, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I was at the AEW Dynamite and Rampage taping in LA in January. Never seen this before in my life in wrestling. AEW Dynamite was obviously live. Rampage was taped. Max Caster messed up his freestyle on Rampage. So they did it again. I've never seen that before in the building. And that's unique to that, right? Where they can edit and that everybody got to do their full entrance in the house. The Acclaim did it twice. Pretty much, or 1.5 times.
1.5.
And so that was unique, but with the I think you do bring up a great point because it is awkward, and we saw it being at the shows in the house. I just don't know, especially when you're working against time, where else you shave from when it comes down to the nitty gritty. I guess if you know.
No, it's a difficult dilemma to have, and it's something which, regardless of where you get rid of the time, you're going to have people complaining. But you both have made some really good points there. But Clark, what do you want to send to Wrestling Hell?
Okay, and this one is a funny one because I don't know why I care so much, but boy, do I care so much. Can we stop calling them premium live events? It bugged me when they started calling house shows live events. Now you're just like, what is this? Are you calling it a televised house show? That's what it sounds like to me. And it bugs me to no end. Call them. I understand it's not pay-per-view, but just come up with a better name than PLE premium. It doesn't work. I don't like it. I still call them pay-per-views all the time. I have to catch myself every time I say it. I mean, there's got to be a better phrase. There's got to be something different. And I think the biggest kicker for me is I grew up on, a house show's a house show. And then you call a house show a live event suddenly, and that was fine, right? No problem. It's implied in the name, right? Like it's a live event. It's not televised though. You know what I mean? It's only for those in attendance. A premium live event, that's like, what, we brought the cameras this time? And that just bugs me to no end. I can't stand it. We got to come up with a better name.
Fair enough there. Coby, what is your response to that?
I think from a standpoint of, yes, I understand everyone grew up with the whole pay-per-view, and it's a thing that doesn't exist strictly in wrestling. Like this, I don't want to say strictly on like a satellite or a cable provider, but often pay-per-view represents when you buy something else additional, or like you're in the hotel and you're gonna buy a movie to watch. You're paying to view it, and I understand that statement. At the end of the day, I do agree with the argument of like, yeah, premium live event makes it seem like a special live event instead of just a normal televised special event. And at the end of the day, I don't know what you could call it. Premium televised event, I don't know, that'd be silly. I can't remember exactly what it was it like a Peacock reasoning, or was it, I don't want to say, was it a Nick Khan thing? It might have been. I can't remember exactly, but I know there was some reasoning behind it. And I mean, it's not necessarily a pet peeve of mine, if I were to say. Like, if I were to argue against it being in wrestling hell, I think it's just something that we as fans are still going to call a pay-per-view regardless, and the way they brand it doesn't and almost shouldn't matter to us from a standpoint like that.
Yeah, I mean, it came from Nick Khan's team, the premium live event thing, when they wanted to rebrand, because technically they were getting in some, but there was potential legal issues if they continued calling it pay-per-views, when in most places it was not it was no longer pay-per-view, which is why they had to rename it. But Clark, do you have any suggestions about what you'd name it instead of premium live event?
So it's funny too. I haven't thought enough about exactly what I would call it, but I will say this: pay-per-view is pretty, it's implied in the name. You pay per view, and so I understand that if you want to take it to the nth degree, it's individualized. You still pay monthly for Peacock to view.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you're still paying to view it. I don't mind going back to pay-per-view. I think it worked. It's, while you're not doing it individually, you still are, if you're doing Bleacher Report or Fight for Impact and AEW.
Yeah.
If you're buying the UFC on ESPN, that is still a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I understand that we view, like, you're thinking of the cable channel that you would have to buy, right? Like you used to do.
I think some of them weren't happy that WWE were calling their stuff on Peacock
pay-per-view. Yeah. And so that part is a shame too, for sure. If it was my choice, it doesn't matter. I'm like, just call it a pay-per-view. It is. Right? It's an easier name to remember because I've said it my whole life.
Yeah.
And every other combat sport and every other organization outside of the WWE, it still is a pay-per-view, right? Like whether it's Fight or Bleacher or whatever you're watching it on, or if you have to illegally stream it, it's technically still a pay-per-view on those ones. And then we go to the WWE and we get we brought the cameras to a house show. It's implied in the name, and I don't know. There's got to be maybe a middle ground. Maybe you call it I don't know, like the monthly monthly big event, the monthly premium event, you could call it maybe, or something like that, but where it doesn't have the link to what we've been calling house shows for so long.
Yeah.
That's all I can think of when I hear live event is oh, it's a house show. And it was like,
no, I get that completely. But at the end of the day, they do a premium on front of it, so it does make it sound a little bit more important than a live event. And when it comes to wrestling entrances being cut short, you do have a similar thing where you're like, well, where else would they cut the time? But out of the two, if I'm going to be completely honest about it, what I hate the most out of the two is wrestling entrances being cut short, because just like you, Coby and Clark, entrances are some of my favorite parts of the show. So once again today, I don't have a lever, but so instead I'll just use this water bottle right here. We're not sponsored by them, but it's some company. And bang, I'm putting wrestling entrances being cut short in wrestling hell. But now moving on to round 2, which is about wrestling heaven. Which wrestling celebrity would you send to wrestling heaven? Clark, I'll head to you first.
I had to think long and hard about this one. We had Snoop hosting Mania, and he was outstanding. Shaq took a table spot from Cody Rhodes in the last few years, and people kind of forgot that. We've had Mr. T headline WrestleMania. We've had Lawrence Taylor headline WrestleMania as well. But at the end of the day, I think there's only one name and it's kind of a throwback. It's Andy Kaufman. It's Andy Kaufman. Andy
Oh.
Kaufman was the best heel in all of professional wrestling for a stretch of years. Nobody had more organic heat in the whole world than Andy Kaufman did. He was a comedian that grew up loving wrestling and got it right away. And once he made friends with Jerry Lawler, the rest was history. And everything he did was gold. The Andy Kaufman t-shirt, and it is hilarious to me because they had one where he was wearing, it was a picture of him wearing the shirt at Mania. And I'm like, if they just sold a throwback version of the actual shirt, that is bought in a heartbeat. And it says intergender wrestling champion Andy Kaufman. Because he would, to get heel heat in Memphis, wrestle women and win. And then all anybody wanted to see was him take a pile driver from Jerry Lawler. And when he finally did, he didn't get up. It wouldn't get up. And they're like, Andy, you got it. The segment's over. The segment's over. And he goes, no, call an ambulance. I'm not getting up. I'm not getting up. And I mean, even he paid the bill for the ambulance just for the sake of the show. And then one of the first times pro wrestling's been featured on major late night television, Andy Kaufman taking a right hand from Jerry Lawler on David Letterman. It's iconic. It's as many eyes as have seen professional wrestling, maybe ever, arguably, outside of like a WrestleMania situation or certain others. I mean, everybody watched late night television at that time. And Jerry Lawler went on late night television and they played out an angle because of Andy Kaufman's fame, not because of Lawler's. And Lawler's a legend in his own right, but because of Andy Kaufman's previous fame and the crossover star that he truly was. It's an iconic moment. You could argue it led to the WWE juggernaut we got because it's the first time we got eyeballs on the product on a nationwide basis, not just territories, not just your local products, not like regionalized. No. This was a national angle for the first time ever. You can argue it led to the inception of the WWE, a global promotion, because it's the first time you saw basically any promotion promote themselves to everyone. And for that, I think Andy Kaufman gets almost overlooked. And that's why I had to go with him as my pick for sure. To put
that is a very solid choice and a name which often, to be honest with you, gets left out of the debate. But I mean, Coby, what are your thoughts about it? And well, more specifically, actually, what celebrity do you want to go to Wrestling Heaven?
So that's the thing, and I mean, I'm coming from the youth aspect of this, and this is where, like, unless I were to watch, like, the Tale of the Territories that was done by Vice TV, that they did an episode on Andy Kaufman, that, I mean, the first I've heard of him is that, and seeing him essentially being inducted as a celebrity member of the WWE Hall of Fame this year. At the end of the day, I understand the point of back then there was territories, and he was able to bring it to the national standpoint, but it also he wasn't the sole focus of bringing wrestling to a national audience. And I'm not going to say this is me defending Vince McMahon, but Vince McMahon is part of the reason why WWE became that juggernaut. Andy Kaufman necessarily gave wrestling one of its first national exposures, but it didn't kickstart that until Vince McMahon took over. So I would not necessarily put that into consideration. To me, the celebrity that deserves to be in Wrestling Heaven, or so say, is more of a newer name, of course. But if I had to say one, it is exactly Logan Paul. And I think a lot of things can be said, and we saw this with the Thunderdome, and Bad Bunny was showing up on weekly television. He took the time to move to Florida to train, and I think he's the one that did respect wrestling. He's the one that you can say, this guy really said, hey, I want to do this, and I'm going to put my trust in WWE to make sure I'm trained to do this to the best of my ability. Where Logan Paul is in a different boat. I'm not necessarily putting him in as someone who probably was a misbeliever at the beginning, but I think And you see this after his matches, and this was more like since he had his first match, he has done everything to say how much he actually respects the game and respects wrestling in general. And he respects the training. He respects the fact that it hurts. And you're going to hear a lot of people saying this is wrestling is fake. And I think it's a matter of like Logan Paul is coming from firsthand of like, I was just a celebrity boxer who started to make a bunch of money facing KSI, and he ended up getting a match with a boxing fight with Floyd Mayweather. At the end of the day, he came to wrestling, and there is a difference between boxing and wrestling, where boxing is real and wrestling is real because you are going to take it is going to take that toll on your body. At the end of the day, I think Logan. I can't exactly state the numbers, but I think Logan Paul is putting eyes on the product. He's introducing his audience to. In this case, he has a lot of young. I don't want to say impressionable, but he has a lot of youth behind him paying attention to him, his brother, his podcast, Impulsive, and he's putting people like Roman Reigns, like Cody Rhodes. He had Triple H on his podcast, and he's getting eyes in that direction. Necessarily, I don't know if we can say if that's a bigger number than Andy Kaufman's national exposure, but I think Logan Paul's bringing a lot to the table, and I think there's a reason why he does respect wrestling, because he learned it firsthand that this is something that takes a lot out of you, and that's to see wrestlers do that on a weekly, almost daily basis. He respects it, and I like that from him.
I definitely think you made some interesting points there, but I will say I got to address one thing. Logan Paul's not possible without Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman was, in a time without social media, without computers, one of the most famous entertainers in the world. Logan Paul is in the digital age, and those are two different things, right? 100%. Apples and oranges. But if Andy Kaufman doesn't spend 5 years in the wrestling business with that run, we don't see Logan Paul. We don't. And I'm not saying you give Andy Kaufman credit for the WWE thing, but he put wrestling on the map at a national stage. He did it on The Tonight Show. And that's something that, as much as Logan Paul can do, Logan Paul is still just chasing a legacy like Andy Kaufman's at this point. Well, you can argue Logan, given the modernization of wrestling, modern technology, better coaching, all of that, you can argue he's the better bell-to-bell performer. But to have an entertainer of Kaufman's size choose wrestling and then intentionally put it on the map, that's something that is hard to quantify, and almost everybody that came after is following that type of blueprint to some extent. Not to a T, not every little step, right? Logan's been a babyface, he's been a heel, he's been both, right? There's little tweaks and whatnot, but everybody's following that blueprint that's doing it right on the celebrity and wrestling crossover end, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, you guys have both made some really solid points here. And Clark, what you just said could well be very, very true. But over the last 2 decades, we've not seen too many celebrities take professional wrestling serious, especially in WWE. However, since Bad Bunny came into WWE and kind of changed that in the pandemic, Logan Paul then did follow in his footsteps. And he's done a phenomenal job, a much, much better job than I really expected. However, when it comes to the bigger picture, Andy Kaufman, I do think, did more for WWE, for professional wrestling as a whole. And for that reason, he is the celebrity that I am putting in wrestling heaven. There we are. So we're currently 1-1. Coby's got 1, and Clark has also got 1.
Tied up,
and
baby.
We're moving now into round 3, which AEW pay-per-view do you want to put in wrestling hell? Coby, I'll go to you first.
I mean, a lot of people know this, and me and Ben Allison are probably the two most critical of AEW at the end of the day. But if I have to think about the worst AEW pay-per-view of all time, or in general, just one of the worst at the end of the day, AEW All Out 2020 has to be it. because coming out of it, we had one of the worst cinematic matches of history. We had Big Swole versus Britt Baker. Uh, what should have been a good debut for in the Casino Ladder Battle Royal. Matt Seidel ended up having a botch on the top rope. We had the broken rules, and well, this is a very infamous incident for AEW's history with Matt Hardy essentially wrestling concussed when they should have stopped the match. You can argue either way. We saw meaningless matches like Jurassic Express versus the Young Bucks and a Dark Order 8-man tag where after Brody Lee's almost historic squash on Cody Rhodes, the Dark Order just loses on pay-per-view. And not to mention we had the Mimosa Mayhem. Coming out of AEW's All Out 2020 pay-per-view, I can without a doubt say that pay-per-view has no good qualities.
Wow.
Like I don't remember I can't even remember enjoying the main event. I always thought the FTR versus Kenny Omega and Hangman match was I thought it was lifeless. I don't remember it being a good match. I mean, Rosa versus Hikaru Shida was good, but that's really about it. I can't state if I was doing what cultures or cultaholics ups and downs, this would have a large majority of downs and maybe one or two ups. At the end of the day, that should not be a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Or that should not be how your pay-per-view goes at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it definitely was a difficult pay-per-view because, of course, it was their second pay-per-view since the pandemic had hit AEW. And, of course, the first pay-per-view was the first proper show that they had, in an arena like that. WWE weren't doing anything like that at the time. They were still in the PC. So Double or Nothing had a lot of good qualities about it because of that, because it was very different, because of the Stadium Stampede, all of that good stuff. But when it comes to when it comes to the pay-per-view as a whole, you are right. It was not a good show. But Clark, which show are you going to say? I believe you're muted, Clark. But yeah. You're still muted, Clark.
Jeez. Sorry.
There we
I'm
are.
back.
You're back,
We're
Clark.
back.
You're back.
So,
what AEW pay-per-view are you sending to Wrestling Hell?
I'm going with Full Gear 2020. So shortly thereafter. Now, while I hear, Coby, where you're coming from on All Out 2020 was definitely not their best effort. It was still the second show with the setup, right? The Thunderdome had been introduced, 2 weeks before? 3 weeks before, I believe. If even that. And at that point, we'd had no crowd noise on the WWE side. We still had some noise, at least at AEW, because they had the wrestlers surrounding the ring and whatnot. While there were botches, Full Gear 2020 takes the cake for me because of a few reasons. Number one, I actually like the Mimosa Mayhem match. So, and not only that, it cracks me up to this day. And I think it was kind of a genius concept because they sold 1 billion bottles of a little bit of the bubbly. And you can't take that away. Also, for me, Full Gear, the problem was you had two kind of flops in the women's division. You didn't really have much. Outside of the Kenny and Hangman match, you didn't have anything else either. You had Cassidy and Silver in a throwaway singles match for not really a reason. You had the Bucks and FTR in a flop of a tag team match that shouldn't have been because it was scorching hot in that building. The in-building fan experience for the few that were there wasn't great. It just wasn't what you would hope for. And then worse yet, you go to Matt and Sammy in a cinematic match that, while funny and entertaining, wasn't really necessary given what we saw at All Out. Let's scrap that. Why'd we have to do a 20-minute movie to follow it up? What, to guarantee that we don't have another concussion botch? I didn't get it, and I didn't really like it. Then we had MJF and Jericho, and one that was easy to forget about because it actually caused MJF and Wardlow to join the Inner Circle, which we forget happened. That's how forgettable that match was. We forget MJF was in the Inner Circle because of this match. So was Wardlow. When I say Wardlow, do you think Inner Circle member? Not me, at least. And then in the main event, we had Moxley and Kingston in an I Quit match that should have been cool thing for Eddie and John. And I understand Kingston honoring his favorite wrestler with the green gear. It looked ridiculous. He looked like a member of the Spirit Squad. And he's in an I Quit match, and he said, I quit out loud in the center of the ring, and he's Eddie Kingston. I don't understand how they booked it that way. It's the worst main event, in my eyes, over the barbed wire exploding match. The exploding barbed wire match at least was awesome until they biffed the fireworks. This match had nothing. And then a goofy finish. He got a bulldog choke with the barbed wire wrap. That's cool. But Eddie Kingston said, I quit out loud? For real? Come on. And I'm supposed to buy that? It's the worst main event they ever had. If it's not for the fireworks botch, this is the one we always talk about. But it was so forgettable. We forget to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest. I personally enjoyed that main event compared to, I actually did prefer that to the All Out main event and the Revolution main event, which followed it, the pay-per-view after the barbed wire that you briefly mentioned there, Clark. But I also didn't mind the green gear, but you are right. You know, him saying I quit, it really did hurt Eddie Kingston, especially in that moment. It wasn't really needed like that. But Coby, what would be in about 30 seconds, what would be your response to Clark's opinion there?
I think the biggest thing is look at how the execution. I think All Out had a worse main event. All Out had a worse cinematic match. All Out had way more filler matches. At the end of the day, even then, the tag title match was way worse. Cody and Darby was good at Full Gear as well.
It was Bucks and FTR at Full Gear. Cody and Darby.
Yeah, Cody and Darby was a TNT title.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
That was that was still a better match than some of the stuff at All Out. Like, let's see. Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara. I enjoyed that match better than the Mimosa Mayhem match. Yes, from a marketing standpoint, the Mimosa, they sold a shit ton of bubbly, but at the end of the day, I mean, Cody and Darby is one of those rivalries that almost defined and created Darby and put Darby on the map in AEW.
I strongly disagree there. I think Darby's rivalries with CM Punk and even his MJF back and forth that he's had briefly, and those encounters have been much more impactful than his rivalry with Cody. I barely remember that it was actually Cody he beat for the title. It was babyface versus babyface. It was a throwaway feud. They didn't even feud. It was a good match.
That is true. That is true. But listen, you both made some good points here, and I do disagree that I wasn't a fan of the Mimosa Mayhem match, but I certainly preferred that over this Sammy Matt Hardy cinematic match. However, the fact are there was issues with both shows. Full Gear certainly had a huge issue with the crowd dying halfway through the show. FTR versus Young Bucks was such a great match. It was laid out to perfection. However, the dead crowd, I know it was obviously not many people there, but still it was way more dead than it'd been on recent Dynamites even, and it had more people. The dead crowd, the length of the match with pretty much no crowd sound, it didn't particularly work in a lot of ways. However, I did really like Hangman versus Kenny Omega on that show. And yeah, overall, there was actually a few good points from Full Gear. It had quite a few issues still, and it was way too long for sure. But I did like quite a few things about it. But when it comes to All Out, to be honest, I didn't really like much, if anything, on that show. So at the end of the day, I am sending AEW All Out 2020 to Wrestling Hell. But yes, so now Coby's up to 2 points. Clark is on 1, heading in to the final round, which is Wrestling Heaven. They can choose whatever they want to send to Wrestling Heaven. Clark, I'll head to you first.
So for me, this is a funny one, and it's kind of ironic after my first topic, which was premium live events. I'm actually going to go with house shows. House shows are one of the best things about professional wrestling. I'll never forget going to house shows as a kid. The fan experience is unique. I understand there's not a commentary table. They don't have the same exact barricade setup, right? It's the old school metal barricade. It's a slightly different setup, but it's the time for performers in professional wrestling to get down what they're going to do in the ring, to almost freewheel it in practice. You have extra time, and the fan experience in the building is outstanding because you have a long card. You have a long show. If you've been to a Raw, it's great, but you know when they're going to commercial. There's more predictability for the in-arena experience on a televised show than there is a house show. You get funny surprises. The talent is allowed to do more than they are on TV. There's room for that. Pre-show, I'll never forget as a kid standing outside the arena and waiting for the wrestlers to pull in. The buildings aren't as big or as full as a televised show where you could never get close to the rail to see guys and girls drive into the arena or walk by and get a high five or a picture or whatever have you, if not for a house show. And not only that, without the opportunity to essentially have like a dress rehearsal almost, it's like you wouldn't send out a soccer team, a football team that hasn't practiced. It benefits both the talent and the fans, and the fan experience is off the chart. I think house shows are huge. I think they deserve to be in wrestling heaven. I think AEW needs to add more house shows. As much as I love Elevation and Dark, they don't need to tape everything. It throws off the in-arena experience. Do more house shows and let the talent work together and figure out who has great chemistry and build rivalries from there. Because I can't tell you how many great matches I've seen on house shows and looked up and gone, oh, wait, they're going to headline a pay-per-view now? That's awesome. That's going to be outstanding. I can't wait. And you know, knowing what we know about how the business kind of works, it's more comfortable watching a match you know they've had in 3 different cities with 3 different times and 3 different finishes on a house show. It's better for the product as a whole. The quality of wrestling improves. And if you have tickets and go, it's as fun as any pay-per-view, premium live event, Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite, whatever, because you're going to get a longer show with a deeper card. And you can't hear commentary in the building anyway.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that even for cutting promos, I love when talent cut promos on house shows to get the in the arena live mic experience. It only benefits promos on the weekly shows and on the big shows. I see nothing bad about house shows, and I don't understand because they kind of get trashed from time to time from other wrestling fans and whatnot. I think it's one of the best things about the business.
Well, you made some fantastic points there. And a few years back now, I went to a house show in Cardiff, Wales, and actually, got up close and was able to fist bump Triple H, which is just a crazy moment now that I do remember and will remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But Coby, what do you want to send to wrestling heaven?
I feel I don't want to say like my rebuttal, but at the end of the day, house shows I do agree house shows have a big positive, but the main kind of negative aspect I could say is it's a heavier work schedule for the wrestlers, for the people working the production, for the people driving the production trucks. At the end of the day,
well, there's no production trucks at a house show. There's no cameras.
There is.
No,
they still have
production trucks,
but they do have the production trucks,
Not production trucks. Those are different. Those would be equipment trucks.
Equipment trucks.
They're not bringing a product. Why would you bring up?
They do because they have to control the lights. They have to control the LED boards. All of that stuff.
They actually still record most house shows too.
But then it comes, why do you record it? I understand that point of why they record it.
It makes no sense, but they do. And at the end of the day, one of the big things is, I know people don't follow this. At house shows, they almost not buckle you down, but they try to say like, oh, you can't take videos. And something that was interesting is they don't say that at WrestleMania. They don't say that at televised events that we all experienced WrestleMania weekend. And I find that weird that they put almost that limit, even though no one follows it.
I will say almost every comedy show you'd ever go to in the world, they do the exact same thing on the no cameras thing because of the nature of what's gonna be happening in front of us. But what's your topic, Coby? I know we're short for time.
Anyway, my wrestling heaven is kind of very, I don't want to say very general or very abstract, but I think wrestling has such a way to get you emotionally invested. And we can think about how the Attitude Era played into effect. The Attitude Era is probably the biggest era or the most watched era of wrestling that we could state. And WWE was almost viewed as, oh, did you watch it? Oh, did you see what happened to Triple H? Did you see Stone Cold get his revenge? Stone Cold was able to be part of that reason of this is almost the everyday man who's able to take his shots at the boss. And it's often a thing that happens in real life where people don't like their boss and they want to take him out, or they don't like him. And they, at the end of the day, Stone Cold was able to do that in real life, of course, in a scripted fashion. But I think wrestling often takes away from this we see people who criticize wrestling saying it's fake. Well, at the end of the day, everything is fake. Everything is fake. Reality TV, they know what they're going to do for each episode, or at least they know what they're going to produce and what story for the episode they're going to show. At the end of the day, wrestling gets you emotionally invested, and we see that with Stone Cold. We've seen that with people crying over CM Punk's return. We've seen that people believing that Edge finally gets to return to the ring, and it was a very emotional thing and one of the greatest Rumble pops because everyone loved Edge and seeing Edge return, and it's a magical thing. And at the end of the day, wrestling is just like anything we watch. It's different to be invested in your own sports team, like, oh, I'm a big Tampa Bay Bucks fan type of thing. It almost lacks that emotional investment unless you really like Tom Brady, or even though Brady's gone, where wrestling gets that opportunity because it is entertainment at the end.
Yeah. And I mean, we've even seen it, recently with, Sammy going into WrestleMania, the Kofi Mania storyline a couple of years ago. When there's a really good storyline, it does get you emotionally involved. It feels bigger than life.
I hear where you're coming from, Coby, but I'm not going to lie. I still don't know what your topic is.
It's emotional connection.
Emotional connection to wrestling?
Emotional connection is the topic.
That is abstract, by the way. You led with abstract. That's my fault.
But yes.
Wrestling's ability to connect emotionally. That's what it is. It is abstract. That's 100%.
No, right. I'm like, you led with abstract. I was just a little bit like, okay, but that was a great speech. I'm like, that was sick, but like, what's the topic?
It is a little bit of an abstract one, but I do get it. And honestly, you are right, Coby. The emotional investment is one of the best parts of professional wrestling. It's when you care about it the most. It's when you forget that it's fake. You forget all these things when you're really invested into something. And that is when you want to turn around to a non-wrestling fan and try to explain to them the story. So I really do love that point. However, at the same time, house shows also do have a special place in my heart. But like Coby said, it's also a bit harder for the performers to have that longer schedule. That was actually one of the reasons why a lot of talent wanted to go to AEW in the beginning. So when it comes down to it, this one's a really tough one. But I'm going to put the emotional connection, emotional investment into Wrestling Heaven. And that makes Coby the winner of today's Wrestling Heaven or Hell episode. Thank you, Clark and Coby, for joining me. It has been a banger of an episode. Great concept. We'll be certainly doing more of these episodes if you guys like them. And just before we close up shop, we got Soul here in the comments saying a tease for the next Soul Sessions guest, or the future Soul Sessions guest. It is a guest, it is his next guest, a tag team champion in the UK, and they want to face FTR at AEW, all in at Wembley Stadium. Ooh, that's one hell of a challenge, and that'll be coming out on the Wrestling Republic YouTube channel very, very soon. We'll be back here, guys, an hour earlier tomorrow for Mailbag Monday, so make sure you guys check that out, where we'll be answering your questions you submit via the Instagram story. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you, and goodbye.